Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, a show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
Back another week.
Every time. So, how are we, boys? Boys?
Just another day.
It's another week. It's so funny in that, like, whenever my parents ring me or whatever it is to be like, hey, just checking in. So, how are things going? I'm like, well, it's just the same as last time.
Everything the same.
I'm working from home. We went grocery shopping. Lockdown's still happening.
Did a ripper fart earlier in the day.
Yeah,
all the exciting things.
My schedule's pretty packed.
Most exciting thing that happened to me today is I redid some of the outdoor furniture with the varnish. That's pretty exciting.
Oh, you are such an adult, George. Such an adult. Take away Macca's.
Yeah, you've gotten old now, George.
I just redoing the deck.
I had one of those moments yesterday. I was vacuuming the house, and I've found now, after rearranging a few of the rooms, because I've gotten that huge influx of, I want to be productive, I'm going to rearrange the furniture to make this room better and all that sort of stuff. I've now discovered I can plug the vacuum cleaner into one power port and reach maybe 90% of the house without having to unplug it. And I told that to my partner. I was like, this is the magic port. Plug it into here. You can reach the living room, the entrance hall, the study, the kitchen. It's great. And she was like, that's good, Tom. I'm like, this is what I've become. This is what I've become. I'm now excited about how efficiently I can vacuum the house.
I mean, there's
the dividends.
It's about as excited as I get with a new cable management setup for my gaming desktop. So
no, I get excited about that as well. That's like hobbyist stuff, though. That's like, you want to have your stuff all set up. I don't know. I was trying to clean my graphics card today, so my partner was looking at me, just being like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm trying to take apart my heatsink." She's like, "I'm going to pretend that I know what that means," and walked away. So, started boring thing. That's just laughing.
We're getting a bit of interference with your signal there, Tom. But heat sinks are very exciting. Yes. So we are a news and politics. I just wanted to let you know. We are a news and politics podcast, as you might have guessed. The good thing about all of this is it does prepare us for the inevitable descent into limbo. So that's good. I thought you were about
the heat death of the universe.
Or the heat death of the universe, either or. You might have heard on the internets this week that Dan Andrews, or Dictator Dan as some know him, has
Dictator Dan
consulted with his comrades in the parliament and have decided to institute a coup.
Definitely a coup. I mean, that's obviously...
Yeah, murdered everyone's firstbborn child, that sort of stuff. I believe the exact detail, is... it looks... it's just standard extension of emergency powers in an emergency. Oh, okay. That's a little bit less...
No, George, you're misinterpreting. That's just the subtext for their master plan, George. Their master plan, I don't know whether you know this, but it's to take over first Victoria and then to slowly expand into New South Wales and then, of course, into Queensland. And before long, even the good people of Western Australia will be forced into the Fourth Reich of Dan Andrews' dystopian autocracy.
It's a young adult novel.
Yeah.
It's
and then we'll name each state can be changed to districts, and then we'll have this thing, these games where kind of like the Hunger Games,
the real Hungry Games, you might call them.
Real Hungry Games. Everyone just fights over a pastry.
Everyone fights over snacks.
Yeah.
Of course, none of that happened. It does seem like a like so much of an overstatement. Like how I'm actually like sort of quite tired of the about how angry all of this is making everyone. Like, because it's like it's really not like pretty much all of this stuff is standard. So what Dan Andrews wanted to do was the current legislation allows for a state of emergency to go for 6 months, and he said, well, this isn't going to be over on September 15th, so we probably need to extend that state of emergency somewhat. Other states obviously don't have to deal with this problem right now because their legislation allows for longer states of emergency, and somehow they've managed not to slide into Orwellian hellscape somehow. But apparently the conservative side of politics here took it as an excuse to jump on the Andrews government and basically try to deny them an extension of powers, saying that it was dictatorial and whatnot. So
I think they've secured a deal now, a watered down version of it, where it's 4-week extensions with the review of Parliament.
Well, here's the thing. The initial proposal was to extend the potential period by 12 months, but it would still require every 4 weeks needing to do a reassessment and declare an extension of 4 weeks. So it's not as though, and the reporting on all of this was pretty shit because all of the headlines were Dan Andrews tries to extend powers for 12 months. And it's like, no, for a potential 12 months in 4-week increments. So it's disingenuous.
I was seeing it even, like, the reporting get even worse because it was kind of framing it in some instances of being like, lockdown to go for another year.
Yes.
I was like, no. And then some people said restrictions could be in place for another 12 months. Well, yes, but you need to wear a mask outside is a restriction. Like, it's not necessarily stuck in your house for another 12 months.
Yeah, it's not
the
saying
way
stage...
The wording people use may sound like Dictator Dan's going to force you to be at home for another year. And it's like, no, not quite.
Yeah, not exactly.
It's not how that works.
It's... Yeah, so, I mean... so as you said, Adam, they reached a deal with the crossbenchers and were able to grant a once-off extension of 6 months, again, to be negotiated every 4 weeks. But it just seems like so exhausting to me that in an emergency, we need to argue with the batshit side of politics about extending emergency powers in an emergency. Like, it just seems like such a bad faith, cynical ploy to have a bat on the other side. Like,
referring back to, well, this is a slippery slope, and, and I think people genuinely thought that it sort of fueled the fire that there's this genuine desire by the current Victorian government to somehow give themselves more power to do something. I don't know. And then people started drawing out like, there's bloody, someone's got shares in this pharmaceutical company, and like it just became this sort of like this conspiracy, this self-perpetuating conspiracy theory. And then there's a lot of people also on Facebook just putting out like I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
but New World Order, Illuminati.
The lizard people running pedophile rings in pizza shops. Like, how do you not see this?
I think. Look, to be fair, like it is. If I said to you straight up, if you only read the headline of the Herald Sun, which literally in the headline of the Herald Sun, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something like extension for 12 months. If you read that, and read maybe the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, you might get the interpretation that, we were going into a stage 4 restriction lockdown for another 12 months, and you would be justifiably angry.
Yeah. The report was so disingenuous from some outlets of just like rephrasing it like that.
It's it's beyond disingenuous. It's actually actively misleading. And the fact is, like, you need to, like, the fact that major news outlets like are happy to sort of perpetuate this is like very problematic, because if you can't rely on, as you said, Adam, like so many more people will just read the headline rather than actually, understanding anything about what it is they're
commenting on or whatever else. And the thing is, like, there's that anger, there's that initial reaction, and then all you need, as we've discussed over the last few weeks on this podcast, is you need just a couple of little fringe actors, whether they be just people that are pushing a particular agenda, whether it be literal foreign interference or whatever it may be. You need a few of these little droplets just to take hold somewhere, start a trending whatever, and then all of a sudden you've got literally gasoline poured on the fire. And one of the things that you've managed to find on the internet was this petition to the governor, which was worded very. Off you go. It was interesting.
So I mean, you say I found the petition. The petition found me. Like, I didn't go looking for this shit. Like, it certainly was not my intention to find it. But this is the exact problem with the internet age, is that misinformation has a way of finding you, because it's a lot more, infectious than actual information. So it was called a petition, first of all, but it's not a petition just because you put a jot form together and have like sort of legal sounding language in it does not make it a petition. But essentially what it was calling for was the governor of Victoria, who, from what I understand, needs to give her assent to a piece of legislation before it's allowed to actually become law. And so the Houses of Parliament would, obviously go through, the lower house, the upper house. It gets signed off by the Premier and becomes law. And I guess the governor has to give it a signature as well, much like a sort of Governor General sort of position on a federal level.
Same thing, yeah.
And basically what this petition, quote unquote, this jot form was calling for was people to petition the governor to prevent this legislation from becoming law, if and when it did pass, which is
the legislation which has been passed by the democratically elected government, and both houses would be knocked back because 35,000 people did a jot form. And
that's
they handed it to the governor, and the governor's obviously going to go, "Oh, wait a second, we've got 35,000, people have filled out a jot form. Obviously, I can't do my constitutional job. I have to stop, and we'll let the people speak."
Yeah, that was the plan. I really love these pro-democracy people that try to subvert democracy to make democracy work better.
It is. Yeah, exactly. Tom, you're back.
Tom's back.
Yes, I'm back. Do I still sound like a robot?
No, you sound perfect.
Told me in a hastily sent text message, I presume, which I've now mentioned on air, which ruins just probably the subtlety of it all.
Ruins the magic. You sound better.
A little bit, but better, I think.
Might be my network connection. I'm seeing some weird quality here in our little chat, but bad radio. Keep going.
It's off and on. So we're just talking about the jot form. So I was hoping to just read a little bit from it, if that's okay, just to give you guys a sort of a flavor as to what's going on in this little piece of information here, or misinformation. Important to note that the Australian Freedom Alliance, which is the group that is alleged to have put this together, is there's scarce little evidence that they really exist, as an organization, beyond just recently. But it seems to be connected to a few people who are involved in conspiratorial far-right sort of groups and thinking. Blah, blah, blah. On 16th of March 2020, the Victorian Minister for Health declared a state of emergency under Section 198 of the Public Health and Wellbeing Act 2008, and then quotes in parentheses, the Act. So lots of very fancy legal language happening here, so it must be true. On the grounds...
henceforth referred to as the Act.
Yes, yeah, legit. On the grounds that COVID-19 posed a serious risk to public health defined in Section 3 of the Act to mean... blah, 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 material risk, that substantial injury or prejudice to the health of human beings, blah, blah, blah. Now, that I looked that up. That is all in the Act. That is the relevant section of the Act. Clearly the person who put this together is not traditionally stupid.
Stupid. No.
I say
as opposed to avant-garde stupid.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I just mean like clearly they have some understanding about legal terminology and how like it is a well-written document. It just happens to be full of lies. Like, but it's not someone who's just like some idiot that's just whacked something together.
Not Jeff from Caroline Springs, who,
right.
Just decided at the pub one day he'd write it down on a napkin.
Right, exactly. No, it's not that. Which is all the more concerning, I think, is like someone who has a functioning brain managed to think that this was a good idea. A state of emergency, having been extended on several occasions, is due to expire by the 15th of September. I strongly oppose and reject any further emergency period, blah, blah, blah. The government is clearly acting beyond the law as it has not, will not, and cannot discharge the burden of showing that there now exists a serious risk to public health as required under the Act. I love these arguments from these pro-freedom people where it's like it can't discharge the burden of showing that there's a public risk to health. So what we need to do is like go around, like it's saying it's not legal. And the response from the government has been, to extend it for 12 months right now would not be legal. That's why we're extending it legally. So we have the authority to do so if and when that comes up. So to then do an end run and go to the governor and say like, hey, you need to reject this thing that's been passed by both houses of parliament is like, it's absurd. It's not democracy. Like that's, you have an absolute right to your incorrect opinion that it's tyranny. And the way that you get to exercise that is at the next election, continue voting for the LNP or Pauline Hanson's One Nation or whoever it is that you voted for last time, because it certainly wasn't Labor. One can safely assume. Let's talk about how the mortality rate for COVID is around 1%. I think the guy, whoever's authored this, has made a very deliberate attempt to not sound crazy.
So to be specific, though, what they've said is that, and I quote, "May I draw your excellency's attention to the data showing that no serious risk to public health is posted by the SARS-CoV-2 virus or COVID-19 disease, and to the devastating effects of the measures taken under the state of emergency on the lives and livelihoods of the Victorian people and the economy of Victoria." Then they go on and start quoting alleged facts, which aren't really that.
Well,
true.
Yeah, and here's the thing, but they keep the craziest stuff out there. They'll sort of insert or suggest sort of vaccine denial things, or there was, or they'll cite countries like Sweden and Switzerland, which have, quote, successfully achieved herd immunity without significant loss. But of course, if you actually dig into those figures, like when I looked into it, it was around 5,700 deaths at that point, quickly approaching.
The same as their neighbours, which haven't done herd immunity. So
yeah. And they're still, by the way, Sweden and Switzerland are still under some measure of restriction. They're doing mask wearing, they're doing social distancing in public. Like they're not doing like restrictive stage 4 lockdowns like we are here in Victoria currently, but
they're not having rave parties in Wuhan, in a pool.
Right. People love the Wuhan pool party. So if you actually look at the numbers, like I would argue there has been significant loss, and without, they've lost nearly 6,000 lives, and also have had a very deleterious effects to their economy based on the restrictions that they've been they've implemented anyway. So it's not as though it's been like, well, look at Sweden, they're doing it awesome. Like there's been a lot of problems there. But the thing that I think is particularly like what's the word, like pernicious about this is like word? These little, is it a word? Yes.
Okay.
Google it. Is the way that it insinuates conspiratorial thought in a way that's like palatable by a mainstream audience. So okay, so
one of the things they say is that COVID is no more serious than the annual flu.
Yeah.
And then they go on to say the worldwide I can't even say this word properly.
Epidemiological.
Yep, that one. Data. Tracking towards around 1.2 million COVID fatalities for 2020 out of an annual total for all causes of over 60 million establishes the seriousness of COVID to be an order of magnitude less than heart disease, cancer, and I can't even pronounce that next word, iatrogenic causes, which each account for the deaths of many millions each year. So
which
the point
is,
being,
which is true, but doesn't account for the fact
not stupidly contagious.
Yes, yeah. Well, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't take into account the fact that we've had an economy melting lockdown to only achieve 415 deaths. Like it doesn't. It's hard to prove the negative, right? You don't know the tens or hundreds of thousands of deaths that might occur if you just let the thing rip. And like this dichotomy saying like it's economy or the virus is not true either. Like that's a false equivalency, because it's the only way you fix the economy is by fixing the situation with the virus. It's not as though if we all just ignore the virus and go out and try and flick everything back to normal tomorrow, like the economy is still going to be stunted and people are going to be afraid to go out. There's going to be no money to spend. People can't go anywhere. Like it's, but yeah, this is the really pernicious one that I wanted to mention. Add to this the suppression of discussion and debate by the government and mainstream media. I don't know where the suppression's coming from, as this petition has, as of time of recording, 35,000 submissions. But yeah, it seems like it's going pretty unsuppressed, unfortunately. Add to this the suppression of discussion and debate by the government and mainstream media, government secrecy regarding its medical advice, rapid extension of police powers and surveillance capability, unlawful use of the military, suppression of potentially promising low-risk medical treatments in favor of harsh interventions by isolation, ventilation, and intubation, and all in anticipation of an unproven vaccine delivered by drug companies who bear no liability. So I think he's saying hydroxychloroquine works, even though we've got a number of randomized controlled studies at this point which say no, it doesn't work. If anything, it can actually be dangerous. And he's saying they're introducing vaccine skepticism about a vaccine that doesn't yet exist. So it's like, how can you be skeptical of something that hasn't even, that doesn't exist yet? Yeah. Like it hasn't, once it's been safety tested, if it passes those rigorous safety tests where we go, okay, we've tested it with 30,000 plus people, we found any danger to be statistically insignificant, and therefore we can safely roll it out. That's the point when they'll roll out a vaccine. But if that's why we were skeptical of the Russian one, because it hadn't undergone those kinds of checks. So to be skeptical of a vaccine which doesn't exist yet and hasn't been tested or approved is like what are you skeptical of?
It's shooting yourself in the foot before you even stepped off the mark.
Yeah.
But the thing that this petition does well, and the reason why things like this are troublesome, is because they take elements of truth and sprinkle it with, or not even sprinkle it with lies, but they exaggerate the potential problems or that need to be worked through. So one of the things that they talk about is that that the COVID numbers and the COVID data is all over the place. And to an extent, that's true.
Data's corrupted.
So Victoria's counting things slightly different to the way the federal government does. And look, that's not. The thing is, that is a problem, and that's something that needs to be resolved. But there's a question of how do you interpret that? And people are interpreting that as malicious intent. That somehow, because there is a difference, it's not just the fact that we live in a bureaucratic, brokered administrative situation because the governments are underfunded and communication is a problem, and we've never done this before, and these are all natural problems that have to be worked through in any project. It's not that. It's obviously that there's some sort of malicious intent by the government to somehow impress upon you and restrict you for whatever reason.
The thing is, to the conspiratorial mind, anything is evidence of a conspiracy, because then if all the measurement standards were exactly the same, they go, see, and all the measurement standards are exactly the same. It's clear that the WHO and the New World Order has been planning this. Why would they all be the same? It's clearly the Illuminati that have been planning this for years. You can't win.
About, is it hydroxychloroquine?
Hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Which was previously a malaria drug.
As a senator for New South Wales, I think, he had a speech in Parliament the other day where he was ripped into this drug, basically saying that the federal or the ruling that we shouldn't be prescribing this at a GP level was somehow false and overtly, strong-willed by the government in terms of forcing doctors to do one or the other, because the data which informed the government's decision, apparently the French study has problems with it. But as you said, there's not just one study that says this is bad. There are multiple, from my understanding.
But until something's been proven to be efficacious, you can't recommend it. There's a certain point where it's because everything's new with this disease, until we get evidence saying this thing, either it's something that has no side effects whatsoever, which almost no drug does, in which case you go, what's the harm, right? Or it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this has some kind of statistical effect before you would recommend taking it. You wouldn't go, oh, well, let's take Drano. we... it's not been proven to help and it's dangerous, so maybe don't do that. I
guess the point being is there is more negative information about the drug than there is the potential positive effects of it. So on the balance of it, you would say, well, let's not take the risk. So this petition's full of things like that, where it's taking elements of truth and exaggerating and inferring intent upon what are the facts of the case.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then I guess by the end of it, they're asking us to asking you to put your name down and get in line and petition the governor to just change their constitutional role and
and it's signed by Australian Freedom Alliance, who they've asked you to give your first name, last name, home address, mobile phone number for SMS updates for any urgent actions, whatever that means. And I love the idea that a bunch of, just freedom humpers are going to go, here's all my personal details to an organization I've never heard of before. I don't know how they're going to store it, what they're going to do with it. But that's fine. But the government wanting to extend a state of emergency in an emergency, that's tyranny.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but if you're going to be a conspiracy theorist, obviously you have to give your data to the people that are willing to fight for your rights, right? Despite the fact that their Facebook page has now been taken down, which of course is further evidence that there is government tyranny where somehow government has control over Facebook. And
tyranny.
Because Facebook loves doing what the government says.
So one of the moderators of the Facebook page was a guy called Frank Luciano. And so I looked up his Facebook fan page. It was it's him and one other guy, but he had his stuff on private. Apparently Frank really loves posting crazy ass fucking conspiracy theory content. So it's a really good example of how you can be duped into signing off on something that looks legit. Whereas meanwhile, you're actually helping something that's part of this much larger sort of, conspiratorial fucking apparatus, posting about saying how to convince people about, the truth about coronavirus. Don't just tell them straight out that it's Illuminati bullshit. You have to talk nice to them and get them, he reposted that as one of the memes on his page. Lots of Alan Jones content, lots of,
cool.
What's that? Pete Evans, the chef, lots of Pete Evans stuff.
Oh, God.
So it's this guy has bought hook, line, and sinker into the conspiracy theory ecosystem. But now his play, which has gone viral, is very much an acceptability. It's veiled in acceptability. It looks like a legal document. It's got legal sounding language. It's very well written. Like, this is the stuff that really concerns me, because this is the things that can go out and go viral, no pun. Whereas, like, if you start off with the fringe beliefs, like, a lot of people would just go, oh, well, that's crazy. Like, go away. But this is like something your uncle would sign or something like that. You know what I mean?
I know people that would sign this and probably have.
I know people. The reason I got onto this was because a person I know's family members are really into it. And he said, hey, check this out. Like, lots of people I know are reposting this. It's subtle. And it's like, that's the thing of it. It's like subtle, and it's more dangerous because of that. And no one's going to go like I went on their website. I've managed to find their website somehow. It's this dinky, like, half slapped together fucking website. Yeah, it's not easy to find. I had to get there through their Facebook page. And like, it's all off kilter. Like, you Squarespace guys, like, seriously, get on it. It's not hard.
Yeah, come on. You got to beef up your conspiratorial knowledge.
The Facebook page has been taken down now. Like, that goes to show that obviously Facebook have looked into it and gone,
the public-facing Facebook page is gone. Pressure. But as far as I'm aware, the Facebook group, the private group, which all of this grew out of, might still be in there. Who knows?
They'll just say, "Oh, free speech." Like, private group, you can be saying whatever you want to each other. Like, absolve ourselves from responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's great at that. So it's their website still had the blog, like the ipso facto lorem, like the fake Latin sort of like, placeholder content of like when you build a website, it's got a bunch of fake shit in there. Like, their blog still had that in there. Like, it's this completely slapped together website. Not a serious organization, but now they've got a list of your like email addresses and phone numbers for their organization, which spans in the tens of thousands as a result of this, which is really concerning.
How do they then use that data? Like, no one's got any idea. And it's, as you said, it's so ironic that people that would be up in arms, it even says in the petition about data privacy and security and stuff, are so up in arms about this kind of thing, have just given it away to who knows who. Like,
to a cynical bad actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, and now each one of these people will now be, you don't know whether it could be a criminal organization that could be trying to,
you don't know,
literally gain access to your Gmail or,
they've given their home addresses, Adam. Home address, phone number, email address, everything. Like, there are websites that you are signed into that have less information than this about you. Like, it is a crazy amount of data.
You could get part way through. And look, my girlfriend's been involved in one of these credit scams where they only need a couple of pieces of information.
No, identity theft, you're saying.
And you can start, using like being hit for identity theft. So anyway, in some ways, like, I'm kind of like, serves you right. Like I said to some friends the other day, like, in some ways, I'd like to see some serious schadenfreude with people that are buying into this.
Yeah.
But if it gets to that point, then there's probably more things that are wrong than we should be more concerned about than sitting here laughing on our ivory tower.
I used to find this stuff funny and go, oh, they'll get their comeuppance, they'll get fucked over, or like, that's what you get, natural selection, that's what you get for being dumb, Darwin Awards. And now I'm just like, sad. Because I don't think it's because they're stupid people necessarily, or they're bad people. Their thinking is...
They're stressed and tired, and they're
simplistic. Yeah. And a lot of people just are, reaching for a thing which makes them feel good right now. And to express their frustration, they sign a thing on the internet, and they're not going to do 30 hours of research like I did to find out who's behind it and what the origins are. And
you did 30 hours?
No, I'm pulling a number out of my ass. But like, certainly in preparation for this podcast and the video I did about it, I did hours of work on it for sure. And it's like, most people don't have the time for that. They're just worried about, how the fuck they're going to make rent this month. And so they see something and go, I believe in that. That's the same thing as what I said. And they just repost it and sign it. And that's really concerning for the health of our democracy, because there are people out there that happily harvest your information, and all of a sudden you start getting text messages or email. You're on an email list now, and that gets you even deeper down the hole, and you've just got like nothing to do all day and internet access, and you could just fall. And this is how people become like QAnon conspiracy theorists. Like this is the access point. This is the gateway drug of conspiracy theory bullshit.
Yeah.
Like there's people I know that I have in my life, thankfully none of my family members, but people I know that legitimately believe that there is a cabal of pedophiles that runs the government, and the Clintons are part of it, and John Podesta and Pizzagate, and that's all real. And this is a serious person. People.
Yeah.
You know,
I think
Yeah.
you know, quite often my experience in organizations or, you know, just in life is that ineptitude and isn't necessarily an indication of, you know, some malicious intent. It's just generally a combination of problems which have compounded to create a situation where shit gets fucked. So, yeah, it goes to something, you know, I think more fundamental to human psychology, where we're searching for something to validate our, you know, our belief. And I spoke to you guys about this previously, that, you know, I think in some ways that the fall of religion in a large part of society, I think, has left a gap where people are prescribing this need to believe in things to
I think, other
areas.
I don't know if it's religion per se, but like certainly a loss of community, like in a real in-person physical community is one of those things. And when you're in a pandemic and you can't go outside, like, that definitely sort of precipitates a loss of community, a loss of cohesion with your environment. And it's easy, as detailed in the Rabbit Hole podcast that I've mentioned, for you to just fall down this rabbit hole, this internet information vortex that's guided by algorithms and your curiosity, not truth. It can lead you down a very disturbing
Google,
path.
Like, or click on maybe 2 or 3 links that are like, you know, and I've looked at a few of these, like UFO stories, which are from, you look at the website that it's from, and you're like, oh, this is not a real, you know, it's obviously not legit. It's just a beat up, really. You may as well treat it as fiction. You only have to click on 2 or 3 of those things, and all of a sudden, every second advertisement or suggested post is of that particular vein of content, other articles or things like it, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's like if you, I actually challenge people to do this for themselves. Just look up, watch like half a dozen puppy videos on YouTube, and then see what happens to your algorithm. Like within the space of a week, you'll see just like puppy videos popping up constantly. And it's like, seems like something really innocuous, but if it's like, you started by looking about, you know, it starts by something innocuous saying like the media is lying to you, and you go, yeah, the media is kind of bullshit sometimes, and then like, you know, by gradation you just get sucked into this, you know, QAnon conspiracy theory horseshit reality, which is completely divergent from the world the rest of us live in. It's not hard to do. Tom and Adam.
YouTube algorithm is terrifying.
Oh, legit. Do you guys have any people in your lives that are like legit conspiracy theorists that think like this?
Oh no, I wouldn't say like legit conspiracy theorists, at least that have made themselves known to me. I mean, maybe there would be people I haven't spotted things that they say on the internet or anything like that. I mean, I've had friends who have just said some things from like, you clearly pulled that from some pretty weird schools of thinking, like saying if Hillary had won the election, she definitely would have started a war with Russia. Like, I remember that being one of those moments where I was just like, what? How? No, I'm not going to ask, because I know that's just a conversation I'm just going to be frustrated with. But I'm curious as to see where you got that information from. But then also, not someone I know personally, but someone that my partner knows or whatever. I think they do. I think they do a lot of like they take a lot of drugs and things like that. They're constantly posting online about, the aliens that are coming to take us all, or the, people being replaced by like clones and all that sort of stuff. So, but I don't know if that's like legit conspiracy, like, what we've been talking about, this disinformation cycle of chaos, or whether that's just drugs. Yeah, but no one sort of really, not by the sounds of like the kinds of people who are sharing these visions around. So maybe I've chosen my bubble well.
I've got not people that I'm necessarily close with. I think the people that I'm close with share relatively the same views as I do, but certainly people I've worked with in the past and other associates, as we'll call them on Facebook, are sharing a lot of, whether it be memes or stuff from Sky News. They're literally buying into some of this, and some have pushed further to the outside the frame than others. But I think that the point being is really, from a political point of view, if you're the Murdoch news organisation, or whether you're the Liberal Party, or whether you're a cynical foreign actor, or whatever, a criminal organisation, whatever it may be. You only have to push the pendulum to like slightly past center to really have an effect, because all of a sudden what it does is it disintegrates trust. And as soon as you disintegrate trust in either the establishment, whether it be the government or whatever else, it becomes a lot harder for them to do things, whether it be in our best interest or not, whether if it is increasing at a stage 4 lockdown, or whether it may be even trying to get funding through for basic things. It becomes a weapon. Mistrust becomes a weapon for political purposes.
It's amazing to me that, I don't know, it seems like fairly consistently it's the conservative side of politics that gets drawn into this. Like, the lefties have their issues, like there's a certain amount of anti-vax and 5G conspiracy and things like that, which are more sort of lefty issues. But it seems like consistently it's the right side of politics that A, benefits, and B, continually gets drawn into these same kinds of, the same modes of thinking. I don't know, like I haven't got any randomized controlled trials that back that up, but it's just my anecdotal evidence that feels how it is. Sorry, you're about to say something.
Oh, no, I was just murmuring agreement.
Indeed. Which is not to say that it's like superior to be a lefty or anything like that, but I don't know. It does, our frames of reference seem more reality based. I'm sure the other side would say that as well, but
yeah, I don't know. I just wonder whether or not it is, before this pandemic, the Liberal Party in Victoria wouldn't have got a look in, I don't think, at the next election. I mean, it's still a year or two away, but this whole pandemic has damaged Andrew's reputation to a point where I think the LNP Victorian version of that, they have now got probably a footing that they wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we now know the opposition leader's name is Michael O'Brien is like, whereas 2 months ago it was fucking some random fucking potato. That is an indication in and of itself that, okay, well, there's an opposition figure now that we're aware of. He has name recognition. Like, that wouldn't have happened but for the criticism of the character assassinations of the, Dan Andrews in particular and the Labor Party in general that have taken place over the last couple of months. I do think it's interesting that a major party like the LNP, like the Liberals they're called here, which is confusing because they're the Conservatives, would be at the head of a movement to deny emergency powers to a government in a state of emergency. Like, the fact that they would have to, because they didn't, and from what I understand, Labor got it by without them. They convinced some of the crossbenchers, and that's how they got the motion passed. So essentially, the state Liberal Party was happy to just like let these powers expire on the 15th. And I don't know what happens after that, at that point, knowing that there'd be some kind of chaos. It's like that, some of you may die, but that is a choice. Yeah. That is a sacrifice that I am willing to make. Like, you would have to own that decision as a party to be like, why did you vote against extending a state of emergency in an emergency? That seems highly irresponsible. And like, what do you think was going to happen? Like on the 15th of September, everything is just going to snap back to normal. Like there's going to be no state of emergency. Everything goes back to normal. Coronavirus is done. Pool party at Adam's house. Like, what do you think was going to happen?
I think a lot of people just sort of assume that. I think the elements of that petition are what a large people are starting to. People are starting to think that coronavirus isn't actually a problem, which is despite the fact that 10 to 20 people are allegedly dying a day. Now, whether that be because of coronavirus or they've got coronavirus and they would have died anyway.
Oh God, don't get me started.
But look, no, in fairness, there's some as I said, inconsistencies with the way Victoria counts those deaths to the federal government, and that will be ironed out over time, but that may go up or down. It could go either way, right?
But like if it was someone like Waleed Ali that was heading that discussion, be like, okay, I'm a person who is credentialed and I'm talking about this in good faith. Hey, there's a problem here. Let's address it as a country. That's one thing. But like using it as a bludgeon to score political points is a different thing. And I think that's what's happening now, is that basically the LNP, I've seen people writing to their minister and saying like, and them writing back, don't worry, there's no way we would support an extension of powers, like really using this as a thing to G up their base. But it's it's not just political expediency. Yeah. Like it could potentially be at the cost of the safety of their own citizens in order to get elected, essentially.
Well, but the point being is that they don't think there is a risk, right?
No. And that's poisonous.
I got a letter the other day from my local member who's a member of the Victorian Liberal Party in the state, my state local member. Actually, I think my federal local member is also a member of the Liberal Party. But anyway, I got a letter which I was a bit like, okay, I know we've got council elections coming up. Why are you sending me correspondence? And the correspondence was to do with it covered two things. One, that a rehab, there's like a private rehabilitation, a physical rehabilitation facility near here, hospital, and it's been repurposed, I think, to treat like sort of non-super urgent COVID cases in aged care. There's a lot of aged care facilities around here. And also that a staff member at my local Coles tested positive, and just to like let us know, and then like telling me that those two things have happened. But there was a little sentence in there that was like, it's disappointing that the Victorian state government didn't consult residents before making the change to treat coronavirus people at the rehab facility. I was like, what? I don't care. Like, yeah, good. Treat people. Like, just a little jab in there because he can, right? Because the Liberal member can. Like, if you can just,
depends. If you needed rehab and all of a sudden they change the system on you, then you'd be a bit upset, I think. But,
I don't think it's that. It's that we're going to have coronavirus people in our community, and there's a not my backyard sensation that people are having. Yeah. That's what I think. It's the same when you put up low, affordable, commission housing flats for low income housing. Everyone goes, that's a great idea. We should have more low-income housing, but not next to my mansion in Brighton. That's not where I want it. Yeah. I want it somewhere out of the way where I can't see it.
Yeah, please not in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like, it's dumb. But yeah, it was just like, oh, you sent me... How many letters of this have you sent out? Like, this could have been just a news alert.
But also,
no, you printed out all these letters just to get a little job in a very liberal area. Clearly,
but also like
election results. So,
what would the consultation have been? Like, you're just can we put some coronavirus people here? And then everyone goes, no. And you know what I mean? Like, they got to go somewhere. So,
but it'll just a little sentence just to rile up the base a little bit, remind them, like just like a little reminder that maybe you should hate the guy who didn't do a thing. Like, didn't do a consultation on using a hospital to treat people. Like, I just remember thinking it was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, it's it's problematic, and I think a lot of I know this is the same person who's the conspiracy theorist that I mentioned before, genuinely thinks that Australia is turning socialist. And I'm like, bro, you guys won the last 3 elections in a row. Like, you even won the election that you were slated to lose. Sad, like, it's not. No, it's just you just have a frame of reference for the world which is just demonstrably false. And I don't know what we can really like do about that as a society. Is there's just people living in completely adjacent realities to us that we also have to treat like people and take serious. Like, I don't know how you overcome that. I just see that getting worse.
That's I
don't know, just good campaigning and mobilizing in the right sort of ways. I'm not a political activism expert.
But the problem is like, before you could just go, oh, that's politics. But like, before you could go, okay, well, these are honorable people with whom I disagree. Like, I think the tax rate should be higher. I think it should be lower. Let's compromise and, and meet in the middle. Like, that's politics. But this is like, I think the tax rate should be lower. And they'd be like, I don't think we need tax. And you'd be like, you can't, taxation is tyranny. And you'd be like, okay, but like, we need to, I can't compromise with you because you're fucking insane. Like,
yeah, the middle ground has been lost a bit, I think, over the last sort of 30 years or so. But like, to be fair, like back in the 70s, there were similar issues that I think were quite emotional for people, and there were vast swings back and forth across the spectrum. But the difference being now is that because of modern technology, voices are amplified, and before you might go to a protest, that kind of thing, but the other thing as well is that the social parameters around should we have a political discussion at the dinner table or at the shops, wherever we are, has changed. Like, I know when I was growing up, people, well, it's to one degree, my family's always been quite vocal with their political philosophies, but there is a concept that you don't discuss politics at the dinner table. That is seen to be impolite.
Yeah. Friends who want to stay friends but discuss religion, politics, or something, as the old adage goes.
Yeah, but I think that shifted now. I think everyone feels that they can have a voice, and in some ways that's a good thing. But the middle ground's been lost, both perhaps because of the rise of right-wing media, but also because I think it becomes a slippery slope, and once it starts to go, it sort of continues on a trajectory. It's hard to recover from that.
It's really concerning because I don't see it getting any better. I if anything, I see it getting worse. It's not as though there are going to be less news channels or less live streaming or less Twitter, or it's all just going to get more and more and more, which is just going to compound the problem, right? So the question is like, what does a well-intentioned person do without caving and compromising with a crazy person? Like, what does a well-intentioned person do? Because, turning out the vote here in Australia, where we have compulsory voting, is like, doesn't move the needle in any substantive way because people have to vote regardless. So it's not like, oh, if we get more of our people out to vote, we'll be better represented. Like, we all have to come out and vote. So what do you do then in a situation where...
I think it's the same thing that I've been talking about for a while, which is that we've got to really look at what does branch level politics look like, and how does that relate to me as a general citizen of society, and how do I buy into that? Because at the moment, there's also a scandal, by the way, where I think the federal government's been branch stacking, or might be Victorian, I can't remember. There has been some branch stacking.
Wasn't it Victorian rural who's now being accused of doing some branch stacking, which is funny because the last time we heard about this was Victorian Labor doing some branch stacking.
And the Greens have done it as well. Everyone's done it. So I think, if we're to reform the system, you need to start at the bottom. You need to start at that grassroots level, and not have conservative Christians being pumped into branches to try and push an agenda, but have a more clear and involving process at the branch level, which currently isn't happening. And until we change that, we're going to get factionalism, which is going to be driving party politics until that's fixed, whether that be in Australia or whether that be particularly in the US as well, where it's completely cooked.
Question is, how do you get involved in local politics when you're not allowed to leave the house?
Well, that's also
a small problem.
But the other thing that for me on a broader scale, the question for me that I keep coming back to is, does it mean that globalization is doomed to fail?
Could you explain a little bit more?
Well, for more of the concept being that the UN, the Eurozone, where we can have large groups of nations and people all having a common goal and a common, ideological standpoint to start from and to progress things, whether that be through the UN, as I said, the Eurozone, NATO, whatever it may be. Increasingly, we're seeing that these systems don't work, whether it be through Brexit. Again, the UN Security Council is basically toothless at this point. While war and other things have been on the decline over the last 100 years, it seems to me that ideological factionalism will never properly allow us to have true globalization where the whole planet's unified to a degree on common ground, if you will.
I guess I see what you're saying. I would take comfort in the way that we've dealt, the way there's been such a global, worldwide effort in terms of collective action in terms of fighting the coronavirus does give me a little bit of hope for what the future, because the main thing that crops up in my mind when we frame it in those terms is okay, well, what can we do about not just coronavirus, but also global warming and other sort of existential threats to humanity that require collective action. The fact that we have been able to get it together, for lack of a better term, fairly well for coronavirus does give me a bit of hope that these multilateral organizations, maybe it's not multilateral organizations per se, maybe it is more private business and things like that, working collaboratively across nations that can really get things done. Things like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, NGOs, but funded by a billionaire. That could potentially be something that's a bit more unifying than any particular nation state that wants to tackle a particular problem in a multilateral organization where everyone's got their own thoughts and feelings and interests that they're trying to represent. Maybe the future is more privatized, but maybe that's just me being a bit Pollyanna-ish about it. I don't know. It doesn't inspire a bunch of confidence.
Yeah, that's also a terrifying notion, because just the more we privatize things, the more fucked they've gotten, right? I mean, look at American healthcare.
Yeah, not privatization per se, but handballing more of the responsibility away from those organizations. And I don't know. I still feel as though there is a place for tackling these big problems, but maybe it's just not the same place as before. Maybe it's not the UN. Maybe it's something else, a different organization.
Maybe. I think the problem being, from my mind, is that if there are so many voices, how do you get a clear direction on any one issue? And if there is misinformation and the spread of opposing ideological factionalism that's growing wider, how does that help us make things better and progress in any direction?
This is why
ending up in the US, where it just it's hard to get progress on particular issues.
This is why we used to look to the US as a moral authority, as a sort of half jokingly as the world police, but also as a credible, sane actor on the world stage with Western democratic values that we could believe in. The absence of that in the last 4 years has really definitely been felt here in Australia and by other members of the international community as well, because we need that right now. But as I said, I'm reassured that we are making there has never been such a global, concentrated effort on one particular issue as the science community around coronavirus. So it could be something
that, there's dozens of vaccines across the world being worked on right now. As to whether or not they're ready in the next 5 years is another question.
Who knows? But never has there been a singular focus on a goal, and like normally the quickest vaccine that's ever been developed was within 4 years, and this should, if everything goes well, take far less time than that. So, like, it does work when we work together. We just need to work together on more stuff.
Perhaps that's something hopeful to end on for today's episode.
Indeed. You wouldn't know it was a comedy show. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on all the social medias at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
And you can follow me down to the ballot box where we can make some real change next election cycle. Probably, hopefully.
Who knows?
It's great. It's all great. It's all going so well.
But hey, look, I've always got that 6-pack in the fridge I can fall back on, so healthy choices.
Fair.
Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
In fairness, I am drinking way too much at the moment.
Aren't we all?